It was so exciting in the early 90s. Many of us, we'd been down with, we learned in Portuguese, abaixo, down with. And now suddenly we are building, we're constructing. For some of us, they were so good at being critics, they carried on being critics, even of everything new. And you need people like that. Some of us were aching to heal, to find positivity, to build up, to construct. And one of the things was to design a new electoral system for South Africa. I remember the very early debates in the ANC ranks. The easiest thing to do for national elections would be just to follow magisterial districts, constituency system. This is what white South Africa effectively had done since 1910, with the heavy loading to keep Afrikaners on board in favor of rural areas. But you had a person who got the highest number of votes in a constituency would be elected to Parliament. We were worried about that. First of all, in England, the source of the constituencies, the electoral results didn't reflect the national will at all. If a party got 44% of the seats, of the votes, they could end up with 60 to 70% of the seats, first past the post. It distorted the national will. Secondly, that would exclude smaller parties. And we were planning for the first parliament would be drafting the constitution. We wanted everybody there. And this would have meant excluding the far right wing. It would have excluded Pan-Africanist Congress. It would have excluded the Democratic Party. We wanted them there. We wanted them to be part of the constitution-making process, that nobody could say after, no, this isn't our constitution, this is an ANC constitution. So the theme of proper representativity was very important, but also inclusiveness was very important. We had a conference, which was on a wine farm somewhere in the Western Cape, I forget exactly where, and it was organized by the Centre for Development Studies at the University of Western Cape, where a number of us had our base. And by the way, one of the fun things I have today, I ask people, which were the two universities that made the biggest contribution to South Africa's constitution? And people say UCT, no. Wits, no. Stellenbosch, no. Pretoria, no. Durban, no. Natal, no. They give up. Number one, University of Western Cape. That's where exiles, we came back, we were at the Community Law Centre, headed by Advocate Dala Omar, Brulan Ngoka was there, Zola Squia from the Constitutional Committee was there, Kad Asmal was there, I was there, Bridget Mabandla joined us there, and there were others there. The other, Potchefstroom, University of, was it Christian Higher Education, Potchefstroom. Francois Venter was there, and another group close to F.W. de Klerk. So it wasn't the grand universities that had the impact. And at UWC, the Centre for Development Studies, set up by Jake Schervel, primarily to support constitution making with scientifically developed, evolved concepts and ideas, very, very inclusive. So there would be many political scientists attending. There would be, from the side that was then our side, 2 people from each of the ANC regions would attend, but it wasn't a political thing as such. And I remember we had a very funny, brilliant member of the Liberal Party in England who was very strong on the single transferable vote as being far and away the most representative and the most inclusive. And I remember that because at UCT we had STV for the Student Representative Council, so we'd actually operated it. But although it was the most inclusive and the fairest representation of the will of the people, it was complicated to manage. It required a fully literate population that could understand all the permutations. It wouldn't have worked in South Africa, where the picture of the leader of the party was vital to identify the political parties. We discussed a number of different positions, and we got used to all the different initials, acronyms, and eventually we decided that proportional representation should be the foundation. It's the one that produces a parliament that most corresponds to the wishes of the people of South Africa, and that was easy to manage. But it had one major disadvantage. It didn't have local accountability. So for the first parliament, we sacrificed local accountability for representativity. The need to have everybody in there. In those days, we often used to cite Lyndon B. Johnson, American president. I'm not going to seriously try his Texan accent, but it was more or less, we rather have the varmints in the tent pissing out than out the tent pissing in. And that was to make our new constitution. But the idea was to balance out representativity with accountability. The second elections would be like the German system, where people vote for constituencies, and then there is a top-up list to ensure that ultimately you get proportional representation. That was the plan. The plan didn't succeed. Why? Incumbents feel the system that got them into power is naturally the best system. Why? Because it got them into power. By then, any influence I might have had was gone, because now I'm on the Constitutional Court. We have to certify the constitutional principles. I'm not involved in the negotiations at all. The list system, initially, many of us felt, would provide local accountability through the branches. The branches would choose people who would get onto the lists, and that would ensure that connection bottom up, top down. I do quite vividly remember the first elections, because I was then in the ANC, and we flew up very early in the morning. I think we had to be at the airport at something like 4:30 to catch the 6 o'clock plane, to get to Joburg at 8, and to be at the hotel by 9 o'clock. I remember that the hotel was packed, the Devonshire Hotel in Hillbrow, Bromfontein, absolutely packed. The air conditioning wasn't very strong. And I remember the nominations that had been put forward by the branches. People had to say, oh, you're available or not. And I'm falling asleep, and Sachs is quite low down on the list, and I'm scared, because I decided I'm stepping out of politics. I want to be available for the Constitutional Court. I'm scared I'll fall asleep and I'll be elected a member of Parliament. I'll be stuck. So I'm keeping myself awake, Sachs, Albert, Louis, do you accept your nomination? I decline. That's when I stepped out of politics. And if that system of strong branch involvement in the different parties had been followed, then the accountability would have been there. But politics being politics, different consequences emerge as time goes on, and people start jockeying, and working together and teaming up and creating factions and groupings and all the rest. So it's clear that that kind of accountability that people want, that they can go to their member of parliament, they can put pressure on them, they can chuck that person out the next time round if they're not doing the things that they wanted, that element has been lost. The Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission, set up by Parliament, it wasn't his initiative, by majority, I think favoured a system of fairly large constituencies which would allow for direct representation but retain proportionality. And it's been discussed since. It had a majority, including a number of members of the then governing party, the ANC, and my own view is Albie Sachs, now former judge, not entering directly into these things, but as a constitutional thinker, not in any party political sense at all, I would favour the Van Zyl-Slabbert position. The problem with very small constituencies is they reproduce spatial apartheid in South Africa, which would be a very sad thing, that whites are voting for whites, coloured people for coloured people, Indians for Indian people, because so many people still live in the created group areas. We want larger constituencies to prevent that from happening. And we want people to vote across their particular communities and vote for people in other communities whom they feel would be responsive to their interests. So hopefully there'll be a consensus. Hopefully there'll be some new kind of getting together and convention of South Africa, whatever it's called, to deal certainly with structural issues, issues of representation, to deal with making local authorities more efficient, less dependent on who becomes the mayor in any particular election, having more consistency, having a public administration generally that is focused on the work that's being done, with basic political direction, leadership being given depending on the election results, but a continuity that serves the interests of the people better. I think there are a number of different areas that could be consolidated. Maybe a permanent anti-corruption group, independent and strong, with powerful investigative capacities. Things like that could be considered.